just really honored to be able to sit next to my friend Ken again. We've been at this in some form or fashion for probably 8, 9, 10 years at some level, and I can tell you there's not a more dynamic leader on this topic in the country that I've encountered in probably a decade of deaning, whatever deaning means anymore, but than Ken. And so for him to invest not just this breakfast, but folks, he's going to be here for 2 days. He's investing in our students, in our faculty. He's going to give us advice and counsel, and really be that voice that allows us to continue this journey, and hopefully in an accelerated way. So Ken, maybe if we could just start off, talk a little bit about your journey, not only professionally, but your journey with diversity, equity, inclusion.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, good morning, and thanks for having me here. After that wonderful intro and those great comments, I should leave now. It's because it's going to be downhill from here. So, but thanks. It's great. What an honor to be here. I will wear my purple Converse the next time I show up. How's that?
All right, it's a deal.
All right, that sounds good. So just a little bit more about me. So I'm actually born and raised in New York City. Live in New Jersey now. My wife and my daughter, who is a freshman at a college on the East Coast. But I'm going to get very, very personal very quickly, just because of the amount of time we have, and really try to set the context for the discussion today around the business of belonging, and really what that means to me personally. And I hope through this, and by the way, I'm so glad I'm here, and thanks for having me, to have this really important discussion. I firmly believe that conversations are the currency for change. Conversations are the currency for change. We must be in a place, especially on topics like this, where we could have real dialogue, right? Without us turning one another off, but really from a listening perspective to see what we can all learn. Conversations are the currency for change. Tweet that or Instagram that, whatever you do. But for me personally, growing up, first generation college student in New York City and raised by a single mom. So she raised my younger brother and myself. And I'll fast forward all the details, but I was fortunate to go to school, major in accounting, and then really get an incredible opportunity to work for a firm. Back then it was Ernst & Young. Shout out to my EY colleagues who are here, and just celebrating my 32nd anniversary with the firm. So thank you. So from the audit side of the business, where I started my career, to the consulting side, where I spent a lot of years leading large internal audit clients around the world, really, to this role in DEI. It's been an incredible journey personally. It's been a journey of a lot of lessons learned, a lot of challenging moments, to be honest, Dean, as I think about it. I'll just go back for a little bit. My first couple of years at the firm, I mentioned quickly, first generation college student, so I show up. I did not intern with the firm. We have a ton of interns now. So day one for me is like my first day at the firm. And we have orientation and training and all the things that we continue to do. But I walk into the class of 130 audit professionals in New York, and I walk into the room like this, and I look around the room, and the first thing I notice is I'm going to see a lot of people that look like me. And I start class of 130 in audit in New York in 1990. I didn't see a lot of people that look like me. And by that, I mean tall and good looking. What were you thinking over there? I don't know. But there weren't a lot of African Americans in that start class. And so, I just take note and I continue on about my business. But my first couple of years at the firm, though, were really challenging, to be honest, because, and we'll talk about this later, but I would say I made a couple of big mistakes early in my career. One of which was, I'll just tell you this, I lost who I was in the early part of my career. I made a calculated decision to do something I completely regret. So I'm going about my business, serving incredible clients. I look up at the partners group at the time. They were probably 95% white males. I'm like, I want to be a partner in this firm one day. What do I need to do to get there? The first thing I did, mistake, was I'm going to be exactly like what I view the current partners were. So let me try to be exactly like a lot of the white male partners in the firm. So in other words, I lost my identity. I made a stupid decision to leave and lose everything about me to try to fake it until I make it, as a lot of people say. And there's a lot to that, to be honest, to unpack, but I would tell you in that moment, I was pretty miserable. I had worked so hard for this moment to be at this amazing firm, and within 2 years, wondered, could I be successful? Wondered, could I make it here? wondered, did I make the right choice? And so much of that had to do with me making this calculated decision that I couldn't make it by being me. Think about that. My decision was I couldn't make it in my mind by being who I was. And at a moment of vulnerability, I'll tell you, I just happened to run across one of the very few African-American partners who helped recruit me. And I was walking down the hall, and he just said, "Ken, how are you doing?" A very simple question, Dean, he asked me. But this time, instead of doing what most of us do in that moment, when someone asks, "How are you doing?" your general response is, "I'm doing great, how are you?" But to be honest, I was just at a point where I was gonna leave. And I said, "I'm not doing that well." And he looked stunned for a second. He didn't expect that response. And he said, "Come into my office, let's talk." And I shared with him all the challenges I was having by not being who I was and coming to the audit room on Monday morning and not talking about the things I did over the weekend, where my colleagues would go down to the Jersey Shore. That's legitimate. That's not an MTV thing. That's true. So a lot back then we would go rent, well, not me, but they would go rent shares of houses on the Jersey Shore and go every weekend and hang out on the shore. Well, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. What I was doing probably was going to Madison Square Garden and going to a rap concert to see like Run DMC or LL Cool J or Houdini. Google those people just because you might want to know who they are. Some of the early rap pioneers. So Monday morning for them in the audit room was, oh, we had a great time at the shore. We consumed some adult beverages, whatever that meant, right? So they did their thing. They probably watched TCU on TV, whatever they did. So that's a discussion in the audit room on Monday, and I was always silent. My assumption was they could not identify with going to a rap concert. So I never said anything about what I did over the weekend. And so again, that's one small example of hiding my identity. And I will just say this, if you ever try to be something you're not, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And so my early days of not really feeling like I belonged, frankly, at the firm, and within 2 years was going to leave, but this guy saved me because essentially he said, "Ken, really important words here. We hired you to be who you are." Essentially, it's going to sound really silly, but he gave me permission to be me. And that was a game changer. Once I showed up to the audit room on Monday, and when they talked about the Jersey Shore, and I said, I was at the rap concert. What was really fascinating, the assumption I made about some of my peers, a couple of them said, "Ken, I was at that same concert this weekend." So I think all of us bring a certain bias to the office, to the classroom. Important to recognize that, but that was just one or a few examples of some early lessons learned. For me, when I didn't feel like I belonged, I was going to leave, but when I felt like and got permission to be me, here I am 32 years later with an incredible firm, have had an amazing career, and a lot of people that helped me along the way. So that's a little bit more about me. Should I just leave right now? Thank you for having me.
That's right. Well, so obviously 32 years, and you have such a prominent leadership role at such a prominent firm. Talk to us a little bit about EY's DI strategy, what's working, what you're aspiring to as you look ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so from a DEI perspective, as you can imagine, the firm's been on this journey for a long time. We've been at this for like 25 years as a firm. Now, certainly how we define diversity over those years has evolved and grown like a lot of us. We've learned a lot along the way. We've gone from diversity to equity to inclusion to belonging, right? So the definition and the focus has changed. But I want to be clear about our consistent commitment. I've talked to a lot of our clients, frankly, in the last couple of years. I won't say names, of course, but I'll be candid. Many of which have just starting their journey because of the summer of 2020 and all that happened there. And that's fine. They started their journey recently. But I would say to those of you who are out here who have started your journey or in the midst of your DEI journey, it takes consistency. Consistency, consistency. Yes, it takes leadership like you, but it also takes consistency to make this thing work. So over 25 years as a firm, we've been invested. I'll be clear, we're not perfect at this. Doesn't mean we have it figured out because we don't. But through good and hard times, we've been unwavering in our DEI journey. The thing about the definition of diversity, it's vast, right? Whether it's gender or ethnicity or veterans or people with disabilities. it goes on and on and on. Like any business, you have to take a look at your data. If you're thinking about trying to grow a business, you look at your revenue and your growth potential, and you invest accordingly. No different in DEI from my perspective. You look at your data, your numbers, determine where you underrepresented, and you differentially invest in those spaces. It sounds simple, but that's what you have to do. I see a lot of organizations who take a wider view of it, and that's okay, but they don't do a lot in the right categories. So I go to a lot of universities, as you know, and I'll meet with the deans or the leaders of schools, and you know a guy like me is coming, so we'll sit down, we'll have great conversations, and a janitor will hand me a brochure. By the way, check out this incredible book and look in the back. There's a little shameless plug. They'll hand me a brochure as part of the discussion. The dean will say, hey, Ken, take a look at this wonderful diversity brochure. And I say, oh, that's great. I thumb through it. It's got a couple pictures of some diversity, and I thumb through it. But then more importantly, I go back to the conversation. Tell me about who's held accountable, Dean. Tell me about your focus. Tell me about your communications plan. And I quickly, this is the phrase I use. I say, team, when I debrief at the end of the day, I just got glossy brochured by the dean. What do you mean? He knew I was coming, or she knew I was coming. They gave me a picture that had a couple diverse pictures on it and a couple programs they do. But being a former audit guy, I know the questions to ask. And as I was asking those questions, I know it's a lot of fluff. So the question for all of you, certainly Dean, I know you're so committed, frankly, that's why I'm here. For all of the businesses that are in the room, is your diversity focus just fluff? Or if I went and I had conversations with you and opened up the hood, if you will, would I still see real focus? Commitment not just from a leader, but your communications, how you're holding people accountable, right? So those are the questions as I talk to our clients. But our journey's been long, it's been hard, it's been challenging. We are committed, and I'd like to say we have more than just a glossy brochure at the firm, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine that a big part of the ability of the firm to maintain that consistent commitment is that you're a very purpose-driven organization. And EY's purpose, if I got it correctly, is building a better working world. How do you see that purpose played out every day? And do you see the connective tissue you would like through your commitment to DEI?
Yeah, so yeah, our purpose is building a better working world. That's absolutely right. And we do that certainly from a client perspective in the markets, but also in the communities that we work and live. And so that could be from a DEI perspective, investing in high school programs, much like an ACAP program that you do here. But it could be investing in students who underserved populations that have no idea what this room looks like and helping to expose them. So that's building a better working world in certain communities. So I had a program in New York, a high school program. We brought underserved students to the office in New York and talked about what we do in the profession and what an accountant does and a CPA is. And I had one young man say something to me that kind of shook me to my core. He pulled me aside. He said, thank you. This is a great program. Thanks for having us here. And he says, this is the first time I've ever been in an office building in New York. He says, I have walked by this building and these buildings for a long time, but never thought I can come into one of these buildings. So building a better working world is about exposing potential professionals like that to what we do, and frankly, a lot of times of what we all take for granted in this room. This is easy for you. You do this a lot. But there are a lot of students and a lot of kids, frankly, who have no idea what this room feels like or looks like. So exposing them to what opportunity and potential looks like. We do that. We do service day, of course, at the firm, like in many places. But it's really, how do we give back to the community, right? You can do well and do good at the same time. So we're a fortunate and blessed firm. We do well, we make a lot of money, but we give a lot. Our people give a lot of their time in the communities. That is what building a better working world is about. And even for me, just at my level, my role, having conversations like this, I hope this spurs someone in this room to think differently when they leave. And I do a lot of these conversations, but I'll tell you this, I have a lot of meetings with clients and with boards, and we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my challenge to them all the time is, what will you do differently, though, when you leave this conversation? Because what I've found over the years, Dean, is that A lot of folks will have DEI discussions, we'll sit in the boardroom and people will look very interested and they'll nod their heads. But the fact of the matter is they'll leave the room and won't change a thing. And so if conversations are the currency of change, I want you to think about what might you do differently when you leave this morning? How will you change someone's life? How will you push your DEI initiatives forward? How will you mentor or reach out to someone who may not look like you or can't relate to you? What will you do differently when you leave this breakfast, right? So I think that's what building a better working world is about. That's how I try to live it. I am a self-proclaimed healthy agitator. I'm a healthy agitator when it comes to DEI. And I do it inside the firm. I do it with our clients. I try to do it in the communities that we work and we live, much like this. So I'm going to healthy agitate throughout this conversation.
All right. Well, let's just agitate away a little bit. You obviously, you have the opportunity to provide advice and counsel to business leaders, and this is a breakfast primarily for business leaders in the North Texas, community. But you also are in a position to advise educators. And so maybe it's a two-part question. What specific things have you seen business leaders do to advance this topic? Like what really works? And likewise, since you do go to a lot of campuses, we have a number of our outstanding faculty and administrative leaders here at TCU in the room. Who's getting it right? What are you seeing that works on the educational front as well?
Perfect. Yeah. So to the business community, I think really ask yourself about the commitment. Do you have a commitment, frankly? More than your website, more than the glossy brochures that you have, do you really have a commitment from your leaders in your organization? And then the communications aspect of diversity is what often gets lost, right? You'll often have the CEO or the board speak to, yes, we're very committed to fostering an inclusive environment or wherever the words may be, but oftentimes it just stays at the board level, the website level. What I always advise our clients, frankly, is to think about your communication strategy. So as a dean, as an example, you have to do more than during Black History Month talk about diversity. Right? And so I think looking at your communication strategy, defining your why, this is the critical piece from a business perspective. Beyond, and this is going to sound terrible, but beyond this, it's just a quote unquote right thing to do, this diversity thing. You've got to really appreciate how does it impact your business and be able to articulate to your people, because what I found is that everyone unfortunately doesn't move because it's the quote unquote right thing to do. Some people will get on board to your strategy and help, but frankly, there are a lot of people, and a term I will use and many have used is you have the frozen middle in organizations. So you may have the leader speaking to why this matters, is important. You have the frozen middle, management, however you define your middle, who will show up to your meeting, hear you speak, and again, go back and do nothing differently. But they want to help in many cases, but frankly don't know what to do. So the question is, how are you communicating why this is important to the organization in addition to the right thing to do, right? Are we looking to expand globally? Are there new markets? Are we missing out on revenue? Are we missing out on talent? And for each organization, the business case probably should get tweaked a bit, but you have to really articulate your why to your people. And many organizations don't do that effectively, right? They just take a couple of the key topics, the key words, they'll speak to it a little bit, and then it doesn't permeate the organization. This work is challenging. Undoubtedly, in every one of our organizations, there are a percentage, I like to think it's a small percentage, of people who don't think this is important. They don't. And the question you have to wrestle with is, what do you do with those folks? Do you spend a lot of time trying to engage the 1 or 2%, I'm being kind, the 1 or 2%? Or do you focus on that frozen middle, which is probably 60% of your organization or more, who want to help, who want to engage, but here's what they have: fear. The fear of, Ken, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? And the fear is warranted, by the way. The way we are today, we're quick to call you to the carpet if you say something wrong, right? You will be, as a faculty member, you will be on whatever Twitterverse, I don't know, whatever they do. But same for a professional. The question is, how do you help them overcome the fear? And this is where, in my opinion, we need a lot more empathy here in this space. I don't always say the right thing or do the right thing. But if I make a mistake and then own it, let's move forward, right? Don't say, aha. So many times in this space, it's about the aha moment, and it's not always good. So I think for the business leader, defining your why, your communications plan, allowing that frozen middle to overcome the fear they have of mentoring someone who may be different, giving constructive criticism to someone on your team who may not look like you or can relate to you. But you owe your team members, you owe them that discussion to give them true feedback. Even though you may be fearful that if I was on your team, we're different in some degrees, we have nice ties, but we're different. You should give me the same critical feedback that you give anyone else on your team, right? You have to invest in me that way. I find that a lot of businesses, again, it's fear is big, it's real. For a lot of professionals of color, maybe women as well, often will not get the feedback they need in a critical way because the manager's like concerned. If I say the wrong thing, are they going to label me as you fill in the blank? So those are a couple comments I give to the business leaders who are thinking about or continuing this journey. And then for the educators, the faculty who are here, I know your commitment, and I'm so proud of that. The faculty in the classroom is critical. You know, inclusive leader. There's this term we use a lot, inclusive leadership. So a lot of organizations and schools will focus on trying to diversify the student body, if you will. How do we add more diversity to the classroom? Perfect. But what will happen often is you'll have a couple of students of color, a couple women, maybe a couple folks with disabilities in the classroom who don't, like I did in the beginning, won't feel like they can be there themselves, right? They're looking around and saying, man, I don't know if I can make it here. And I would say to the faculty members, the power that you hold in making an inclusive classroom, truly being an inclusive leader in the classroom. That international student who's sitting there in front of you, who you may or may not be able to pronounce their name, so you never call on them in the classroom. That's not right. It's not being an inclusive leader. When it comes time to doing group and team assignments, how does that work out? If you allow the classroom, it's my healthy agitator, if you allow the class to pick their own set of 5 of teams, they're going to pick their friends. So if the only person of color in that room, guess what? You're the last person selected, if selected at all. The faculty, I think, need to think about how do they become inclusive leaders, set the right stage, call on people, challenge everyone equitably across the board. And I still hear today that there are a lot of faculty that don't do it. And I think that would help greatly in the classroom, help people to thrive. So, quick example. I'll never forget this. My intermediate 1 class, I had a faculty member 3 weeks into the semester, wanted to see me after class. I was the only African American in the accounting class. He pulls me aside, Dr. Goma, never forget him. He says, Ken, I see so much potential in you. Then he says the key words, but I need more from you. Wow. I see so much potential in you, but I need more from you is what Dr. Goma told me. He challenged me in such the right way, in such the right thing I needed to hear. And guess what? I'd probably double down on my effort in that class. And I feel like I owe him so much because those words at that moment probably propelled me. That's in your mission. Propel. You want to propel folks. You got some incredible, like unleash potential. Propel people. That's in your mission. I read your stuff. He unleashed me after that comment. Like, so to the faculty, the words you say and the actions in that classroom matter every single day in those interactions. Never forget that. I owe Dr. Goma, he knows this because I've told him thank you. I've donated a ton of money back to the school because he is so responsible for me being on the stage, and there are many people. But for faculty, the words you say and your actions you take are so important in that classroom. And you don't get enough thanks, so thank you for that, because I know there's many Dr. Gomas out here, so that's what I would say.
I love it. Very specific, very actionable for all of us. You've talked about the kind of the evolution or the inclusion of different dimensions of inclusive excellence, from maybe starting with diversity and then equity comes into play, then inclusion, and now it's belonging. Give us the business case for belonging. What's going on there?
Yeah, belonging. There's so many studies done. HBS in the room, they've done a lot of studies on the business of belonging. This psychological safety, you're more motivated. Your performance is so much greater when you feel like you belong and you're a part of something. That, as I described my earlier part of my career, I left out a few things, but once I got permission to be me, my performance at the firm improved greatly, right? The sense of engagement I had improved greatly, right? So there's so many benefits to this notion and power of belonging. You think about your respective teams for the businesses that are here. If you just think about your employees or your staff, and if you just analyze your turnover, if you analyze however you do your performance metrics, start to take a look at the data. And if you start to see trends for different groups in your organization, I would say to you that those folks are probably not feeling like they belong. So as a result, they're holding back. Their performance is probably not where it should be, and they're going to leave. And we've all seen a lot of turnover in the last couple of years. Turnover costs money, right? So if nothing else, the business case to ensure people feel like they belong. And you mentioned at the top in the intro about innovation, right? I think back to how it's weird, but I was so much more committed to the firm because I felt like I belonged at the firm. Like I tell first generation students like this all the time when I speak to them. Many first gen students will show up, because I was one of them, and they'll show up first day or on the class and on the campus. And to be honest, many are just happy to be there. But think about this for a second, because I was that student. Like I went to college, and it was almost like that was my destination. I was like, oh, I was so happy to be in college. But you shouldn't be happy just to be here. And so my message to a lot of these students is and this is true in the firms too, by the way, don't be happy just to be here. Like, the real work has to begin now at this moment. And it's about, what do you do with this incredible opportunity ahead of you? It's difficult to do that if you don't have this sense of belonging. I'd submit that if your students felt, and they probably do here because you're a special place, I get that. But if the students felt like they belonged in the classroom, all of them, I'd imagine the power of the conversations would be amazing, right? If you felt comfortable to bring your perspective and point of view in the classroom, from the business leaders here, if your people felt like they belonged in your organization, they wouldn't hesitate to come up to you and say, I've got a great idea. Here's what I think we could do to become more efficient. Here's what I think we can do to increase revenue. But if they don't feel like they belong, they're just going through the motions. So there's some real benefits here to this thing called belonging.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of belonging, we hope that many of you are taking advantage of the 3x5 note cards that are out there. We want to hear your voice as well, not just mine. Mine's a little raspy from that football game on Saturday.
Double overtime,
I know,
double
right?
overtime game.
Yeah,
Yes.
crazy, right? So
I think I saw you on TV.
I might have been. Yeah, I was by the goalpost, tearing it down.
Hanging off the goalpost.
Yeah, that was me. Yep. Sorry.
Purple Converse.
Sorry, Tamara. Anyway, so please share your voice with us. We have some of our student leaders that will be gathering them, and then they'll deliver here. But while we're doing that, I do want to ask kind of a throwback question, because I've heard you speak over so many years, oftentimes on a formula. Knowledge plus action equals power.
Yep.
Right? You mentioned the powerful conversation just a moment ago. So let's bridge into that formula and what it means.
You're a good listener, man. That's good. So. So that you heard this kind of knowledge equals power phrase. And so I tweaked a little bit. I said knowledge plus action equals power, right? And so really the meaning of that is, it is about what actions, and this is from a diversity standpoint, and frankly everything in your business, you know a lot, you hear a lot, but the question is, what are you going to do about it, right? What kind of actions will you employ when you go back to your organization? And I think the action piece, frankly, is where a lot of organizations are lacking. I will say a lot, leadership is a contact sport. The issue is we have a lot of leaders who don't want contact. Y'all heard that, right? Leadership is a contact sport, except we have a lot of leaders who don't like contact. That's a problem. So the action piece is really critical. This school doesn't do well without your leadership, without your contact. And this is not all, I'm sure this is not all smooth and easy for you. As a dean, as a leader, you're going to take pushback on things. This space is controversial for folks. I've seen it. I've been around the country. I've been to a lot of schools, a lot of places. Talked to a lot of deans, a lot of presidents, a lot of provosts. This is a topic that's very challenging at times. Leadership is a contact sport. Fortunately, you're a leader that likes contact. So the action piece is really critical. Again, I go back to all of you in the room to think about what actions will you take away from this conversation. Because I said conversations are the currency for change. So what actions will you take when you go back? Or are you just going to be status quo? The reality is you could be status quo and everything will be fine. My why, I mentioned quickly, I have a daughter who's a freshman. She goes to Lafayette College. She's all about my why right now. I do this at the university level because I know at some point she was going to go to college. So I try to healthy agitate when I go to universities, ask questions around what is your DEI strategy? Ask questions like, and schools hated me when we did our tours. They did. Because I'm like, tell me about what you're going to do to ensure my daughter is safe so she feels like she belongs, so she could be her incredible self that she is. And so for me, trying to define the why piece is important. So my why is about my daughter. So when I think about EY and the firm and the companies and clients that I go and help consult with, I think about Kelsey when she graduates, when she becomes an intern or is an intern somewhere or works full time. Is she going to go to the right environment where she could be successful, where Kelsey can walk in to be, I keep saying this, the amazing young lady that she is, thanks to mom. But so I do these conversations because the action is important because she may end up at one of your places. She may end up working for you one day in your organization. But I want to make sure she can go to a place that she can thrive, that she can help the business become even better than it is today. And she doesn't have to worry about her safety or lack of belonging. So the actions that you drive from this, that's my why. I think about Kelsey. Think about your own children, your own grandchildren. What kind of world do you want them to enter into? What kind of environment? What kind of school? So that's why the actions you take, and all of you have power, the actions you take will be critical for Kelsey, for me, to your kids, to your grandkids, and frankly, for the future of this nation.
That's beautiful. And this is a beautiful question. How do you create conversations with those who don't seem to want to engage?
Ooh. Next question. That is an awesome question. I think there's really a decision to be made. Let me tell a quick story, and then I'll come to that. We had our U.S. CEO at the time a year ago on an all-hands call. So we have these all-hands calls in the firm, and everyone comes together, and we talk about results and she always talks about diversity. That's always on the agenda. But in this particular call a year ago, she put the values up on the Zoom meeting or the Teams meeting for us. She said, here are the firm's values. You've seen them all. Reread these values for me. And she said, at the end of this call, we're gonna send out an email to everyone in the firm. I want you to reaffirm your commitment to the firm's values. So one's like people who demonstrate integrity, respect, teaming, and inclusiveness. And but she's like, reread the values, and then I want you to reaffirm your commitment to the firm's values. And then here's what she said I thought was awesome. She says, some of you will read it, and most of you will sign it, reaffirm it, no problem. Some of you will read it, and you will not want to reaffirm your commitment to the firm's values. She said, that's okay. However, maybe it's time for you to look for another opportunity if our values don't align with who you are as an individual. Wow. Talking about walking the talk, that was an incredibly powerful statement. So to the folks who don't want to talk about it in the organizations, one, I think you have a decision to make. If the direction of this organization is not what you agree with, the question is this the right place for you? And by the way, we don't always have to agree. This is where I think people get this wrong, and it's what I'm concerned about. People have this discussion in corners. It's like, you believe that, I believe this, and we're not even going to talk about all the gray that's in the middle. I'm going to believe what I'm going to believe, you're going to believe what you're going to believe, and that's it. I'm not 100% correct, nor are you. And the question is, how do you have discussion within the gray? And so I think you try to invite those people to have a dialogue, right? I have a lot of these dialogues with a lot of people, one-on-one often, who, and they give me a lot of reasons why they don't care about this thing, why it shouldn't, it doesn't matter to them. And I say, well, help me understand that. Some will walk away and say, Ken, all right, I appreciate your perspective a little more. Some will never. And the question for the organization, frankly, is, what do you want to do with those people? Now, if they're derailing what you're trying to accomplish, I think you're going to have to make a tough decision. So in other words, if you're very focused on this, if you believe that having a diverse organization can get you growth in certain markets or globally around the world, but if they're in there making people very uncomfortable, if they're causing turnover, if they're putting your organization at risk for what they're saying and doing, you're going to have to make a decision, right? It'll come back to haunt you one way or the other, legally, through turnover, and through people impeding what you believe as an organization is important. Now, so that's one piece. The other one is, do you just, as I said earlier, do you put more time into that 60, 70% of your organization who really probably wants to help and engage, but aren't sure what to do?
Right.
I'd say spend more time there. But anyway, that's an awesome question. Thank you.
This one's an interesting perspective as well. This individual articulates, international students are often taught to assimilate when they get into the country. What you said earlier about losing yourself was very telling. But what is the line between assimilation and being true to yourself and just being yourself?
Great question. International students, always a fondness, because I want all of you to think about this. I know I couldn't do this when I was 18, 19, to leave the U.S., to leave New York where I grew up, and go some part of the world where that's not my first language, to go get an education. I didn't have the courage to do that. And so I applaud the international students for doing that. Many international students, as we know, will come to the U.S. and change their name to some American name in quotes. So just think about that. So from the beginning, they made a decision, I can understand why, to come to this country, to change their name so they could be Mike or Melissa. So that's the first thing I would say to international students. I always try to get people, like, if I can't understand how to pronounce your name, I'm like, say it 50 times until I get it right. Right? So they come to the country, they come to your school, they come to the classroom. From the beginning, they've already lost, like, it could have been a traditional family name. There's probably a lot of meaning to that name. They said, let me leave that. And there's a bigger question here is the why. Like, this whole thing of assimilation, man, I can give a whole nother talk on that, by the way. Hint, hint for next year. No, I'm just kidding. So I think this whole notion of assimilation is an interesting conversation in the spirit of healthy agitation, right? The U.S. for so many years, and still many circles, it's been known as the great melting pot, right? The great melting pot. We've all heard it. But let's dig into that a little deeper. To me, a melting pot is we throw all of you, and all of you are diverse in your own right, into this huge pot that's very hot in some kind of stew, and essentially you melt down to become one thing. In other words, you lose all the diversity and all your identity when you go into the melting pot. I speak about diversity in terms of a salad bar. Think about a salad bar. We all love salad bars. Get your plate, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions. I don't like onions, no onions for me. Bacon, love bacon, a lot of bacon on my salad. And in the end, you put some dressing on it. And you eat that salad, it is incredible. Because all the ingredients maintain their identity. And you mix it all together, it's a beautiful salad. So, same vein, that's why assimilation is more like, to me, like the melting pot, right? We don't want you to necessarily, I want to hear your perspective and point of view. Our firms, our companies need to hear how you're thinking differently. Because undoubtedly, we all have a blind spot in business. There's a risk for a client that we may be missing. But we have a student who grew up in a part of the world who gives us another point of view. So this assimilation thing, this melting pot scenario, while I appreciate historically that's where we were, it doesn't define, from my perspective, the importance and the magnificence of this thing called diversity. So think garden salad. And again, all of you, and this is, diversity is about all of you in this room. All of you are diverse in your own right. And what gets lost in translation here is that diversity is only defined to if you're black or Latinx. No, diversity is about all of us. And in order to really realize the full potential of it, we've got to be more like a salad bar.
Well, it is about all of us, and I think that you've opened a lot of eyes and given a lot of insights as to what might we do differently as we leave here today. We've covered quite a bit of ground. We started out with the notion of conversations being the currency for change, and what a conversation we've had here today. The importance of not losing your identity, giving yourself, if it doesn't come externally, giving yourself permission to be you. Because you're not going to make it if you fake it. You're going to make it because you are who you are. We talked about the need for a consistent, not a commitment, but a consistent commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talked about a data-driven approach, right? Look at the data and then make differential investments accordingly, and doing it in an enduring way. Don't be the glossy brochure, right? Be the change that you seek. The business case for belonging, how it can improve your organization's performance at the individual level, how it can reduce turnover, and the power of conversations as a result of feeling that you belong. Knowledge plus action equals power, and I think today sets us up so beautifully for the action that we seek. Whether you're one of the business leaders and those very specific commitments to communications that were discussed going beyond your website, or you're a faculty member, right? That really is the steward of the next generation of business leaders and innovators that the world needs. And then to conclude with this notion of don't think melting pot, but think of a beautiful garden salad, and how we're all unique and we all have our identities and we all have diversity, and why it's for each and every one of us, Horned Frog or otherwise. I'd like to thank our sponsors once again, the good folks at Frost, Esri, a new sponsor that's joined us, the Fort Worth Business Press, the Balcom Agency, Lindbeck, Acme Brick, BNSF Railway, another new sponsor, Dunaway, and the good folks at McDonald Sanders. You allow us to curate and cultivate conversations with this much power and this much action. Thank you for joining us, Ken Bouyer. Thank you for the investment you're making in our young people and what you're doing in the broader community as a whole. Let's give them a great
pleasure.
Horned
Thank you
Frog.
so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And I've never thought I'd ever have the chance to be Oprah Winfrey, but today I get to be Oprah Winfrey because there's a signed copy of Ken's new book that will go to whoever the lucky person is with a sticker on the right-hand side of your chair. Yep, that's it. That's you. All right, we have a winner here. There should be one winner at every table. Ken and I will be up here if you want to chat.
Yeah.
You got, there's one.
You got
there's
him?
One.
Oh, good.
Hey, this
See?
stuff works.
This does work. That's good. And they're on Amazon if you want to order some more. It's fine.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, that's great.
All right.